In the spring of 2025, just before Mother's Day, Jim McCann did something almost no founder does voluntarily. After nearly 50 years of building and growing 1-800-Flowers from a single Manhattan flower shop into a billion-dollar gifting empire, he fired himself days before one of the company's busiest times of the year. He took himself out of the mix and handed the keys to someone else.
Unbossing is a show about reinventing leadership in chaotic times. Each episode, we connect with leaders in business and tech and ask them, what did you have to unlearn to succeed again? I'm Rishad Tobaccowala.
And I'm Drew Ianni. Today's guest started his career as a social worker in Queens, tended bar on the side, and bought his first flower shop with $10,000 borrowed from his family and friends. That was 1976. What came next for Jim McCann was one of the most unlikely e-commerce origin stories in American business.
Jim grew that one shop into a chain of 14. Then in 1986, he heard a radio ad for a nearly bankrupt Texas company that owned the phone number 1-800-Flowers. He bought the number, he renamed his company, and he spent the next 40 years making that bet pay off.
Along the way, he became one of the first retailers in America to sell online, AOL's first merchant partner, a pioneer in e-commerce before we knew what e-commerce even was. He built a multi-billion-dollar gifting empire, expanding it to include Harry and David, Cheryl's Cookies, The Popcorn Factory, and a dozen other brands. This is a conversation about learning and unlearning, about growth, risk, and stepping away. Let's get to our conversation with the founder and current chairman of 1-800-Flowers, Jim McCann. Hi, Jim. It's great to see you. It's been a little while, and we're so thankful that you're joining us for this edition of Unbossing. How are you?
Spring has finally arrived here in the New York area, so it's impacted all of our moods.
Yeah, indeed. And you're in the business of moods, for sure. What's top of mind for you? You woke up this morning, the business, life. What's top of mind for you when you think about leadership and you think about the company?
Well, there's the practical, what's right in front of us kind of thing. I want to be sure all our systems are working properly. We're balancing our supply with the demand, that everyone's getting taken care of, all our deliveries are arranged. That's from an immediate point of view. From a broader perspective, I think, like so many of us, I'm overwhelmed with curiosity, interest, some concern about where the latest wave of technology will take us. And that is everything AI enabled. And seems to, for sure, in the last couple of years, I've become dramatically convinced that it's going to change everything I can think of. And how that change happens and what happens in that in-between period of disruption is certainly forefront on my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely want to dig into that because 1-800-Flowers has obviously been at the forefront of all of the new technology platforms from web to mobile. And we look forward to digging in on how you're thinking about how AI is going to and is already impacting your business. But let's start a little bit and rewind. I know you've told this story a million times, but can you tell us a little bit about the founding of 1-800-Flowers? And as you look back on that journey in the beginning, what were some of those learnings as you look back?
Well, the learnings have been many times a day over many days. We're just celebrating our 50th year in business.
Congratulations.
So 50 years ago, I started with a flower shop on the Upper East Side of New York. Knew we wanted to try and grow a business. Wasn't quite sure how we would do that. So not having a business background or a business education, it was just what have I learned from being around a small business. That is my family's business. My dad was a painting contractor, and so I watched him and his brothers and his mother run that business, and I had a seat at the board table, which was also the kitchen table in my grandmother's house where they ran the business out of that home and facilities behind it. I was a little fly on the wall listening to them talk about estimates and jobs and supplies and labor and needs and accounts payable at all. So I got my business education from a family of small business operators. And then when I wound up in business myself, with the idea that I wanted to grow a business. Yes, I wanted to become a florist, which I did, but I really went into the business with the idea of trying to grow it bigger and not just have a good, successful flower shop. And toward that, after 6 months being open with our first shop, we opened a second shop and then a third. And my first career kind of job, I've had a lot of little jobs, but my first career kind of job was in the social services. I worked at a home for teenage boys. And I was a live-in counselor in one of their group homes with 10 young men. And then I ran the group home, then I ran all the group homes, and then I became the administrator of the home. The first 3 years was intense. I was living in and working in the group homes. And then when I was promoted, they had a main home where they had about a couple of hundred boys. And then when I became the administrator, I moved back to the main campus. But it wasn't a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job anymore like it was when I lived in or ran the group homes. And working in social services is very rewarding, and certainly I learned a ton. Uh, as I think back, so many of the lessons I learned in those few years are the same lessons I try and put in practice today. How to organize people, how to set goals, how to keep score along the way, how to make it a journey, and how to make a team act and perform better than any individuals could. All of those lessons I learned running a group home are the same lessons I'm trying to apply today in the businesses that we have today, including the flowers companies. So I kept my full-time job at the home for years after I started in the flower shop business so that I didn't know anything about financing or how to raise capital. I didn't know anything about any of those things. So I just did everything bootstrap. And to be able to grow, I decided to keep the job as long as I could so that I could pay the mortgage and buy food for the small growing family I had. And to supplement my income, I worked as a bartender on the Upper East Side, Friday and Saturday nights, which were big payday nights.
Yeah.
One of my customers would stay late while we were getting ready to close and chat with us, owned the flower shop across the street, told me he was going to be selling it. And I asked if I couldn't come work there a couple of Saturday afternoons before I went to the bar. He said, sure, but why? I said, maybe I'm a buyer. And I did that. And I really liked the business. I liked how we were involved in people's lives at celebratory moments. They were usually in a good mood. There were some grief moments too when you're dealing with people who are suffering a loss, but mostly you're dealing with people on these very happy and celebratory occasions. So I liked the business. I thought I could learn it. And so I wound up buying that flower shop, and that started me on my second career.
It's an amazing journey.
I remember early on when I was looking for examples of people on things like AOL and Prodigy and CompuServe, the only person that I ever saw who was not a software company was you. So you've always been a pioneer. So what made you that?
Well, I think the lesson, I have a younger brother, 10 years my junior, who joined me after I was in the business for 10 years. And that was part of the next big wave. So the waves that we've been through have been several, 6 now if you count AI. The first one was a retail store, so retail. The next was the 800 number. And that's when my younger brother, Chris, joined the company. And he's right out of university, so he's comfortable with technology and curious about it. And so we wind up buying this defunct company that had that corresponding 800 number in it as an asset, which was the only thing we wanted. And we got to start over. And we thought, mostly because it was a new technology and it screamed convenience. And 800 numbers were new then. So yes, we got a lot of free publicity about being the first company whose name was its telephone number.
Right.
And so that was the new technology then. Everyone was talking about it then, similar to how they spoke about the internet in the early days and how they're speaking about AI now, except AI is much more profound on its impact, of course. So we got a lot of free press on being the first company whose name was its telephone number. And when I asked, you wouldn't be surprised by this, Rishad, but when I asked people in the flower business about an 800 number and people being able to order flowers online 7 days a week, 24 hours a day using a credit card, everybody in the business told me I was out of my mind. Back then, people had accounts at a florist. They didn't use credit cards, and they didn't even order that over the phone that much. They'd go into the shop to place an order. And so it was just, it seems silly today, but 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, that was a radical idea. And people just thought it was dumb. And then when I changed the name of the shops to 1-800-Flowers, they really thought it was a bizarre idea. And it was, until it isn't. And so in answer to your question, what made us look at new technologies? Here were a couple of guys from South Queens who had a flower shop and then a whole lot of flower shops, and then became a national brand in just a few years' time with no capital. Not because we didn't want to spend money, but because we didn't have any. We couldn't get it. So the reason we became a franchisor was I started selling those shops to families that wanted to run those businesses, which is a much better model for them and for the business. And that gave me the capital as I sold shops, gave me capital to try and fund this effort. So my brother Chris and I sat there and said, if we could become a national brand and a dominant player in our little category, what's the next technology that's going to come along that's going to disrupt us? So that's the Andy Grove's "Only the Paranoid Survive." We were paranoid. We couldn't believe that we became a national brand with no money, and a man who was a big part of that just passed, and that was Ted Turner. I was lucky enough to meet Ted at a conference in Atlanta, and we just hit it off. I thought he was bigger than life, and indeed he was. And he decided to take me under his wing and show me how we can market on this new thing called CNN. Think how revolutionary. It was a cable news network, the first 24/7. So sound familiar? The first 24/7 news network. And I was lucky enough to spend time with him and watch him and learned a ton from that experience and on so many levels. And that's how we became, one of the ways we became a national brand. He said he was dissatisfied with the fact that the only advertisers, or the most of his advertisers, were selling record clubs or Ginsu knives and things like that. He wanted the high profile advertisers that the networks had. And so he asked me, did I want to advertise on his network? Yeah, of course, but we can't afford it. We'll teach you how you can. And so he worked with us to develop commercial. He did not want it to be a direct response spot because that's all he had was direct response advertisers. And he says, look, I'm going to teach you that you can build a brand and sell the pork chops at the same time, was a term he used with me. And so this giant of a man who was inspirational for us helped us become a brand. We were always on the lookout for what the next technology was. Now, you only know the 5 or 6 that worked for us, but you don't know the other literally 50 other technology ideas that we tested that didn't work. But the one that Chris kept coming back to over and over again was this online world, not yet called the internet. And in the beginning, as you mentioned, AOL had a walled garden was the term. You might remember. You were probably third grade at the time. But we worked with AOL and CompuServe. And what I learned there was we had to make a decision. Were we going to work with CompuServe, Prodigy, or AOL? Who were we going to throw in big with? And they really were forcing us to make a decision. And based on the fact that we got to know, we had a friend, his name is Ted, who worked at AOL. He's one of the 3 big principals there, Steve Case, Bob Pittman. And Ted invited us down to meet Steve and Bob, and we just hit it off with them. I remember we had a steak dinner at a nearby restaurant, and I think we sat there for hours just talking. And finally, Chris and I decided, hey, look, we know these guys. We trust these guys. Let's go with AOL. And our instinct was go where you have a relationship, and a relationship that you think it'd be worthwhile to invest in and that it'll be beneficial in the long term. And surely it has. I'm still very fond of Ted, Steve, and Bob, and close to all of them over these many years. And that was a great decision. But the decision wasn't which service do we go with, it's which people do we have a relationship with, or do we expect we can have a relationship with. And frankly, Prodigy had a big, beautiful office building in White Plains, New York. They wore suits. They were backed by IBM and Sears. Everyone thought we were nuts to go with this startup from Virginia, but it was all bet on people, and it sure paid off. So that was in 93, maybe. We were the first transaction of any kind you could do on AOL. And then in 95, when Mark Andreessen introduced Netscape, ergo a browser, and organized this crazy, chaotic world, it moved from AOL, the walled garden, to the broader access on the internet. By 1998, it was really starting to matter to us. And we saw that it was going to overwhelm everything else we do. One thing I'll point out to you, though, is as we've gone through these 5 waves before AI, and first stores still have them, then the 800 number still have it, and still tens of thousands of people call us on that line. Then it was the internet, which has overwhelmed our business. Then it was mobile and social. But we've never gone away from any of those platforms as long as there was a constituent audience that found it useful. And by the way, people aren't channel zealots. Someone who might place an order with us to deliver flowers to a mom who just had a baby in a hospital, When they find out, oh my God, she's already been discharged from the hospital, I just placed that order, they'll want to call us to change the address. They don't want to rely on going online. And I think a little bit of that is age too, where you are in the demographic mix. Younger people seem to not want to talk to a human being at all. And they're very happy interacting with an AI agent. But people don't stick with a single channel. They'll come into our stores, they'll call us, they'll come to us online, they'll interact with us on Facebook, however it's comfortable for them.
Absolutely. So is AI the seventh or the sixth?
I'd say it's stores,
Yep.
800 number, internet, mobile, social. So this is the sixth. And I'd say this is all about engagement. It's about reordering everything. Apps and websites seem to melt in importance. It's just there's a person with an interest, and then there's a whole lot of data sets out there, and how they interact is what's getting put into the blender here. But I think it changes so much. I can't imagine some of the things we're going to learn. But
Absolutely.
it's terrifying and exciting at the same time. Yeah.
So before we think about unlearning, my sense is your experience with AOL, etc., was pick the people, trust, and relationships. I'm
Absolutely.
assuming that those will not change in the future.
I don't know, but we were chatting here over the last couple of weeks at 1-800-Flowers that what's amazing is as much as our technology is changing here, and it's mind-blowing, the thing that isn't changing, 50 years later, we're still in the same business. And the business, I think, becomes more important as we go forward because we're in the business of helping people express and connect to the important people in their lives. It's about helping them to have more and better and deeper, more meaningful relationships. And that's what we used to think we were in a gifting business, but we weren't right about that. We're in the business of helping people express themselves and connect. Lots of times that'll be a gift, but more and more we're of the mindset that, yes, we have wonderful gifts. We have beautiful flowers and gift baskets and Harry and David food gifts. So we have a full range of wonderful gifts that help you to express yourself just right. But it really is about the relationships you have and what you want to invest in them. And if we only focused on the gifting part of that, we'd only be doing half our job. So much of what we do in our messaging and communications and now in our investment in capital is to develop tools to help people have those relationships. For example, as a student, I was the last one to get my papers in, usually late. But then 6 years ago, I committed to write a letter to our community on Sunday. So at the beginning of COVID, we didn't know quite what to do. Everyone was going into lockdown. And what do we say? Hey, buy our flowers while you're in lockdown? It made no sense. So what the young lady who was my chief of staff at the time suggested, why don't we just write about the things we're hearing, the things we're seeing, how we're coping with this, and invite a dialogue. So we created a newsletter called the Celebrations Pulse. And for 6 years now, we've been doing that every Sunday. And what we write about is relationships. And at the beginning of the calendar year, I often suggest to our community that while they're making their resolutions about their diet and about the books they're going to read and about how they're going to spend more time with their family, all their resolutions, they ought to sit down either with a digital pen and pencil or a literal pen and pencil and make a list of all the relationships that are important to them in their life. And there should be 3 clusters. One is relationships you have that are good that you want to keep investing in. Another column should be those that you've had, but they've seemed to wane over time. And some of them you want to go be deliberate about reinvigorating. And then there's a list of relationships you don't have, but you want to work to develop. Could be in your community, could be in your workplace, it could be in your profession. And so what we're building now is an AI tool to help you to follow through on that relationship resolution plan. And that's not something you'd expect your florist to do. But when you think of us as someone's here to help you to have more and better relationships. So what we do with the newsletter is we use the calendar. And I was just thinking of this the other day because it was in March a few years ago. My wife and I were away, and that Sunday before I had written that, don't forget, Friday is National Father Sunday. And it was going to be that next Friday. And here it was that next Friday, and I realized I hadn't said or done anything to my sons. And I have 2 sons and a son-in-law. And so I said, geez, I should follow my own advice here And I sat down and I wrote a text to each of them and telling them how I felt about them. And I had a wonderful weekend. I had a wonderful weekend because they each wrote back over the next several hours and with very thoughtful notions and expressions of how they felt about our relationship and how they valued it. And it just made my day, week, month. And so it just drove home the point, while I'm giving advice to other people, I ought to take it myself. And it really does work. So we use the calendar to find events like that. Use the calendar as an excuse to think about the relationships in your life and what you can do to act on your sentiments, to act on your thoughtfulness, and to engage in ways that are meaningful for you and the other person you want to connect with. So we do that with a Celebrations Pulse every week. We now have a community of 14 million readers of the Celebrations Pulse every week. And I don't go anywhere that people don't come up to me and say, I love the column you wrote 2 weeks ago about such and such. And it just thrills me because so many of those people don't just read it, they write back to us. So I was just recently looking at a whole bunch of people write to us about relationships they've had and experiences, and we prompt them. We ask them to share stories. We always ask about rituals. I'm keen on rituals we all develop. And we were talking about holiday rituals around Thanksgiving and Christmas and Halloween. And it's just fun to hear people's rituals, and then how we encourage people to develop new rituals. Invent their own. We really don't have anything. Make one up. We had one developed for Thanksgiving in my family during COVID when we were all reluctant to gather in a house. I live here in New York on Long Island, and all my 7 grandkids, my 3 kids and their spouses all live nearby. And so we're blessed in many ways. And so I was trying to think of something fun to do that we could do outdoors. So I said to each family, I'm going to have grandpa's turkey tacos. And so I gave one family the assignment to build me a sign for my taco stand. And another family developed my apron. Another one built my hat. And they all branded it Papa's Turkey Tacos. And we just had fun with it. But it's become a tradition now. Now, the first year, I'll tell you, I did it on Thanksgiving Day. And I caught heck from my kids because the kids loved it, but then they weren't hungry for Thanksgiving dinner. So now I do it on the Monday afterwards, and we make extra turkey, and we always have leftovers, and we invite them and their friends and other families, and we do turkey tacos. But we created, we took a bad situation, COVID, and something fun and nice came out of it. So we talk a lot about rituals and the importance they play in our lives.
And I think I was on the original distribution list, and it's something that I look forward to every Sunday as well, Jim. And congrats on building such a great loyal following with that.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing, when we've known each other a little bit, and every time we've talked or I've heard different stories, you have found yourself taking chances and making decisions about strategy and where to go when people are telling you crazy to do this. And I always love to hear from people who do things that are a bit seemingly counterintuitive. So my question there is, it just relying on your gut? And in terms of that process, that personal process, you talk about relationships. So I expect it's relying on people where you have great relationships. But in those moments where you're making a big decision about whether to invest in a technology, do something where everybody's telling you it's crazy, did you have a process in terms of relying on other people to help you make that decision, to help get you to decision point on a big strategic and, if not considered to be somewhat risky, decision?
Yes, I've heard Rishad talk about this too. You certainly can't, if the committee agrees, it's probably not very bold. So sometimes everyone says, yeah, that's the right way to go. It's probably wrong. And so you have to get all the input you can. Yes, absolutely. Curious as can be, and I am very curious, and we culturally are. But we have to, culturally, one of the things we have to work on around here is the idea that people are afraid to make a mistake. And that's just natural in all of us. We don't want to make mistakes, but you have to. And so I remind people that we had 50 different technology trials before we settled on putting the most wood behind the internet arrowhead. 50 different. That means 49 failed. I remember we put a catalog on a CD-ROM. That idea didn't go very far. But There were 50 of those ideas. And the 51st was this online world. Look at software as a service was a great idea until about 90 days ago.
Jim, what are some of the other mistakes that you've made, either personally in the company or strategically, if any?
You don't have enough time, but every day we're making mistakes. I'd say as a company and me as person responsible at that time, the biggest mistake was we didn't go fast enough. We should have gone faster on everything, from a technology point of view, and we didn't. The other thing is related to that, which is we knew an awful lot about technologies, some of these technologies, very early on, and we never really bet on them beyond trying to make us a better floral and gift company. So we've known a lot about AI for a couple of years. So I'm an investor in not a lot, but a handful of big AI stocks. So I've done very, very well. But we haven't really taken that knowledge and invested in other ways, because the way we think about it is we're curious about new technologies and how they can help us do what we do bigger, faster, better, cheaper. But if we invested in other companies earlier on, we might not have to work so hard.
That's absolutely true. And so let me ask you another question on time. You recently, I think a year ago, decided to replace yourself as CEO. So you unbossed yourself.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about the thinking there. Where was it difficult? Why you thought about it that way?
It was extremely difficult because I should have done it before. I did do it before. 10 years ago, I stepped down as CEO, and my younger brother, Chris, 10 years my junior, replaced me. Unfortunately, he sick and had to step down. So I only came back with the sole intent of replacing me. And so that part wasn't easy. It took longer than I wanted it to. So that was the hard part. But I found a terrific guy to bring to our board and recommend him, and the board agreed. And so he's been in that role for a year. Because the company, all my sins were apparent here. I let us get too bureaucratic, too slow. That we were convinced, and I was convinced as well, that these new technologies were going to change radically how we did things. There's a fellow I befriended at Microsoft in a very senior role there, who told me 2 years ago this month that he asked me how many people we had here at 1-800-Flowers and Harry and David at our companies, and I said something approaching 5,000. He said, be prepared that within 5 years, and I think he was maybe wrong on the timeline, it's much sooner. He said another company can come along and do everything you do. They won't have your brand and they won't have your database yet, but they'll be able to do a lot of what you do with 5% of the people you have today. They won't need 120 people in the finance department. They won't need 20 people in the legal department. They won't have 180 people in the technology function. They won't need programmers, because the large language models, which is what they were called then, are going to be better at coding than we are. And it's been ringing in my ears ever since. So it gave me the impetus to say, I have to move quickly here to make sure we have the right leadership in place to retune and re-engineer our company so that we're faithful to our mission of helping people have more and better relationships, that we have the right products and sentiments and tools and AI tools to do that. So when they want to write a greeting card to someone, they don't have to settle for what someone sitting behind a gray desk in Kansas City decides the right sentiment. They can use an AI tool to craft exactly the sentiment they want. They can do it in the form of a sonnet, a poem, a lyric, a limerick, however they want to do it. And the graphics should be exactly what they want on the front of the card, and AI tools can help them to do that. So if that's all coming and those tools are there, let's make sure we have the right organizational construct, the right leadership who can move faster than this broken down old fossil. No regrets about doing it, just wish we'd done it sooner.
Jim, 3 questions on that. So one is, for many years, we learned that speed kills, and now you're saying lack of speed can kill.
Certainly.
Which is number one. Yep. The second is we always believed that scale and size was a moat. And what you heard was it might actually be an anchor versus it being a moat, right?
Yes.
And the third is that we always thought that we could do more and the customer would buy from us. And what you're basically saying is the customer can customize what they want more and more, and we enable it.
Indeed.
And those are 3 and we think of all the businesses built on let's do it this way, slow and steady. Let's do it with scale and size. We know better. And your stuff is, that's all gone.
I also want to talk a little bit about brand, because you've built a great brand over 50 years.
Now, let me take advantage of you guys. You have two really smart marketing brand guys here. The question always is, well, when are you going to change your name? Because I say, I'm not sure we ever will, but certainly not now, because while it sounds old, 1-800-flowers.com, I don't have to tell anybody we're convenient because our name screams convenience. We have a 90+% recognition, unaided awareness. We caught lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
Should we throw that away?
No.
Not at
No,
all.
absolutely not.
We've obviously got that. And to the point that Drew made, listening to you, you have trusted relationships and differentiated, personalized solutions. And you're constantly differentiating your solutions so that they're better than other people or more relevant.
But we're
and
not
they're
doing it
personalized.
well enough, Rishad. Here's an example. People every day say, well, I want to send flowers. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll go online, I'll go Google a local flower shop in the town that I'm sending the flowers to, and I'll skip 1-800-Flowers. There's a lot of people who would try and do that. Now, what's happening, we don't do a good enough job at is telling them why they don't need to do that. A, they're going to get a better value from us because of our buying power. B, we know who every flower shop in the country, certainly in the world, certainly in the country are. And who the good ones are changes from day to day to week to week. Smith's Flowers in Duluth, Minnesota, great shop, except their head designer just went on maternity leave, and there's really no one else there to watch the design room, and it's really falling apart. We know that because we have 200 people out in the field every day, in and out of these shops, training them, working with them, talking about the new designs and new products that are coming through the loop, and getting to know what's going on in those shops. So they get the benefit of our local knowledge. They get the benefit of our 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week customer service, which no shop is going to provide. They get the benefit of our loyalty program, our 100% satisfaction guarantee. So there's 8 or 9 or 10 reasons that come to mind why they shouldn't do that. Yet some people say, I'm going to save $5. Then they find out, wait a minute, that wasn't really a local flower shop. That's some scammer who decided to go post that they're Jericho Florist. There is no Jericho Florist.
Yeah, and that's
Right,
the brand.
exactly.
That's the brand loyalty part
They're
to
running
me,
a
Jim.
clock.
That's the brand loyalty part.
Yep.
People trust you. Trust is going to
Right.
be the currency in this age, and is my opinion on that. And there's also the fragmentation of, in terms of customer, which customer? People who've been longtime
Yep.
loyal to you, they're loyal and you have that relationship. But to your point, what about the first-time flower buyer? I'm not sure the age of an average first-time flower buyer, maybe mid-20s, I'm not sure, but they don't even know what a 1-800 number is, right? So
Exactly.
they just hear 1-800 number, or they see it, and I'm sure you're investing in it just like you.
Or they go to flowers.com, which points to us, or now they go to flowers.ai. That's us too.
Right.
Ooh,
they,
that's
or
amazing.
they ask ChatGPT, what should I use? And now you need to make sure, just like with search, just like with online, just like with mobile, just like with the 1-800 number, now your brand needs to be there in AI, the answer engines, right?
Jim, a couple of questions before we lose you. Can you tell us a little bit what unbossing means to you, if it means anything? And a little bit about the importance of unlearning and advice you might give to people about unlearning.
I was given very good advice 40 years ago, which was I made the mistake of thinking I needed to be the best at every function. So when I was running one flower shop, I wanted to be the best flower cleaner. I wanted to be the best designer, the best delivery person, the best salesperson, the best repairer of the van. And for a while I was, because I was the only one. But the advice I was given was fire yourself. And that's why Sarah at the Wall Street Journal wrote that story last year about me firing myself, which was a wonderful story and a great surprise. I'll tell you a quick anecdote then.
Sure.
So it's this time last year, Wall Street Journal front page story, founder of 1-800-Flowers fires himself. We have a tradition on Mother's Day, our families all gather back at our house. My wife gets some food catered in because we're getting out of the shops late. It's later into the day than most people would be. And so we all gather at our house to have some dinner together. And my then 9-year-old granddaughter sees the copy of the Wall Street Journal that Mary Lou had saved, and it was on our counter, and she reads that, and she gets this horror-stricken look on her face, and she turns to her mother and says, Does this mean no more Cheryl's cookies? She had about her grandfather being unemployed.
Yeah,
Right. What does it mean to my life? Right. So fire yourself. So unbossing is fire yourself. And
Exactly, from every function, because there's always someone who can do it, maybe not better, but good enough that you can go on to do the things that only you can do. So firing myself as a CEO put someone in who was much more talented, had much better set of experiences to do the job that needed to be done, to allow me to focus on the stuff that only I can do, which
Got
is
it.
the writing, the engaging, the ideation, looking at the future. And that's a better use of my time.
So focus on your comparative advantage and replace yourself everywhere else.
Every way you can.
You know, you're so full of great advice on so many different topics. You're curious and you're
You said full of. I wasn't sure where you were going.
no, you're curious. You're a man about the world. You read as all sorts of different things. And what would you give? What's the advice you would give to a young person as it relates to what careers they should seek out? What's your advice to the young person, maybe the fresh college graduate graduating now or in the next couple weeks?
It's not original. What I'm not unabashedly good at is stealing other people's good ideas. And I like what Scott Galloway, as someone known to all of us, has been advising young people on for quite a while now, which is, I love the line he has now in his book about young people. He said, the person who tells you to follow your dreams, or follow your passions rather, is already rich. And they made their money in an iron ore smelting facility.
Right.
He said, find something you're good at and get really good at it so that you can earn money. And even if you're not passionate about it, how many people are just passionate about what they do? But I think being curious, focusing on relationships and investing in those relationships. When you meet someone, it shouldn't be, what can they do for me? It's, what can I do for them? And I think the fact I mentioned losing a hero yesterday in Ted Turner, the fact that I met a guy like that and I got the nerve somehow to go up and say hello to him and introduce myself, changed my life. So I had a chance to be the commencement speaker at St. John's University in Queens last year. And so consequently, I'm in touch with a lot of the students who were in that graduating class who had to sit through my commencement. But I think making sure you are good at writing, developing relationships, being curious, being a good time manager of your own time, being deliberate about the things you do. But but it all settles down on, what are you doing to make resume a verb, not a noun? What are you doing to improve your skill sets, your relationships, your network every day? And if you're resumeing in a proper way, you'll have your antenna up for the opportunities, because it's going to be like those old pinball machines, because young people now are going to have to be pinballed around. And the smarter they are, the more curious they are, the more willing they are to work harder than anyone else, the more likely they are to find success and relationship happiness. I befriended another podcaster this year. His name is Dr. Arthur Brooks. And what rings in my head is the message he has in all of his work. He's a professor of happiness up at Harvard. And he says it's all about four things: faith, family, friends, and doing meaningful work. That doesn't mean that you can only do a job, but meaningful work is in your job and in your free time. What are you doing? Is it meaningful? Is it making a difference in someone else's life? And it's been ringing in my head every day since 5 months ago when he and I first met.
That's wonderful, Jim. Jim, thank you so much for the time. I'm going to propose it right here that we circle back at some point and do a part 2, because I know we could easily go another hour. Your wisdom and your generosity are most appreciated, and I'm glad we got this time to talk.
There goes your credibility. It's gone. It's out.
Perfect. Thank you again, Jim.
Thanks, Rishad. Good to see you guys.
Bye-bye.
I don't know, Rishad, I thought that interview was phenomenal. Jim's lessons, he's a great storyteller. Some of the things that I took away, I think number one, relationships, unquestionably, both in your personal life and relationships, and informing your decisions in your professional life, and who to do business with, who to partner with. I thought relationships really came through as Jim's North Star.
I agree. He also talked a lot about two things that are very important to us, which is unbossing and the fact that he decided to fire himself, which became a lead cover story in the Wall Street Journal.
And the ultimate unbossing move, right?
And he explained to us that one of the reasons he decided to fire himself was because he wanted to focus on things that he did particularly well, and that there were many better people, including a potential CEO, to do the things that were needed for the time moving forward. But as importantly, he reminded us, and he started early on with obviously Andy Grove's Only the Paranoid Will Survive.
Right.
But right now, he reminded us that almost all the things that the reason he fired himself was some of the stuff that he had burdened the company with made no sense anymore. For instance, a bureaucratic scale and size, and his belief that scale and size might actually be an anchor and not an advantage. His basic belief that he moved maybe slowly, and it's now not speed kills, but the lack of speed kills to a great extent.
Yeah, his story is very inspiring, not just the beginning of the journey, but even where he is now, and staying curious and staying involved and understanding. It's very interesting. He certainly looks at the company as a pivot to new technologies over time, a constant pivot to new technologies. And thinking a little bit about the brand, we sort of started to get into that discussion, which was a lot of fun. And I even think he underestimates, but it's not him underestimating, it's him just in his natural paranoia state, which is sometimes the state you need to be in, is the value of that brand. And we talked about in AI, however many millions of customers they have, those are the relationships, brand loyalty. AI can't really replace that. They can challenge it, for sure, with things like authenticity. But it is that brand loyalty that's going to continue to serve that brand well. And I think he's built up that brand loyalty in spades. And it's just a constant exercise of bringing in new customers and new generations of customers. And I think that's a big sort of moat as it relates to AI and defending your business.
And for everyone who's listening, he said something that I am going to build on, because he didn't say it exactly like this, but he suggested that we all unlearn and fire our own resume.
Yeah.
Right? So he basically said many of us look at our resume as a noun, but it should be a verb.
Yeah.
And that in effect, we should not be anchored by what we've done, but what we should do. And towards that, he suggested we need to be curious. We need to invest in generosity and ask how we can help people. Focus on what we are particularly good at. Manage our time well.
Yes.
And be great communicators, including great writers.
Well, that's it for today's episode. If our conversation with Jim McCann got you thinking about what you're holding on to, and if it might be time to let go, take a moment to leave us a rating and a review. It helps more people find these conversations.
Follow Unbossing on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're not already subscribed, this is a good time to start. We have more conversations like this one coming up this season that you won't want to miss.
The world is asking all of us to unlearn something. The question is whether you're brave enough to actually do it. I'm Drew Ianni.
And I'm Rishad Tobaccowala, and this was Unbossing. See you next time.
Unbossing is a Bubbler Media iHeart podcast production